War will shape the global outlook, followed by negative supply shocks, as the International Monetary Fund IMF lowered growth projections, adding that the damage is more severe for countries in the Gulf. This is the general position of the IMF as it presents the World Economic Outlook, pointing out that inflation remains above target, raising a new unemployment concern with the supply curve more flat. For policymakers, the fund says central banks must act decisively to rein in inflation while the fiscal space is much thinner with rising public debt.
Now, the war demands immediate attention, yet it should not derail from the pursuit of durable growth. It should also spur faster adoption of renewable energy, which can strengthen resilience to energy shocks, improve energy security, and support the climate transition.
And as expected, the IMF has lowered a projection of growth. Nigeria is not spared. The war is defining this new phase of projections, but it is more severe on countries that are around the Gulf. With the fund lowering the projections for Nigeria, the twin concerns of inflation and debt again remain in focus.
Higher fuel and fertilizer prices and higher shipping costs that I mentioned are going to weigh on non-oil activity in Nigeria. There's some offset coming from higher oil prices, but at the end of the day, the balance is for weighing on growth in 26, with some recovery built in 2027.
Meanwhile, the group of 24 nations has called for a cease to hostilities as the global economy continues to be impacted by crisis in the Middle East. The group at its meeting focused on the general global concerns, particularly as they affect the developing economies.
Whilst looking to see what can be done by the developed world, and even the multilateral development institutions should also step up to the plate at this time with support, liquidity support, as well as the usual thought leadership to help countries negotiate through. I think the most important lesson is that there has to be a reliance on domestic resource mobilization within these countries.
It's mainly supply side constraints on oil production, and supply side constraints do not respond well to monetary policy like interest rate hike. So I would say that unless central banks see that some of these inflationary pressures are going into wages, are showing up in real growth, they should at least on balance wait and see how things evolve. But of course, everything has to be in a data-dependent manner.
The IMF's concern about global financial stability is alarming, and jobs will be affected by advent of artificial intelligence.
Let me underline that artificial intelligence represents both opportunities and risks. And one of the risks that we are highlighting is the cybersecurity risk in this area. So that needs to be managed carefully, and the appropriate policy steps need to be taken.
The general consensus is that support for the most vulnerable is needed, and policymakers should be ready to pivot if the trend continues, with developing countries facing higher financial market risk. From Washington, D.C., Leah Katung-Babatunde.